Hey, welcome back. Hopefully you were able to spend some time thinking about the first part of this video with me and my mom as we work to partner together with you guys as parents or grandparents or whatever with your students. The last video, if you haven't gone and checked it out, make sure to go check it out. We talked about really three things. One, you got to meet my mom, but two, we talked about the fact that students, your child, your grandchild, whatever, your student is a gift from God. And how does that impact the way that you interact? How does that impact the way that you parent? How does that impact the way that you look at your student? Two, we talked about the fact that your student is designed for a purpose. They have some plan or purpose in God's kingdom. And it may not be to be a pastor, it may be to do something else, but like what is that and how can you help them achieve that? The third part was that we talked about that the family is designed to make disciples, right? And that sometimes we have to make some decisions to allow more spiritual growth, to allow that. So for me, in the last part of this, my mom shared about how I was only able to play one sport at a time because she wanted to make sure that church was a priority. So what kind of decisions are you making to help disciple your student, to help your family disciple your children, your students, and maybe gave you some time to think about that. So today, for this part, we're going to jump back in. My mom has a couple more points to share with us, and it's going to be a little bit different. Not really, but we're getting into a little bit harder of a topic to start off. So again, we're just talking about ways that she parented me and what it looked like, that maybe you can chew on as ideas, some things that maybe if you like the ideas and how I turned out that you can follow, and if you don't like the ideas and you want your child to be exactly the opposite of me, then do the exact opposite of all of these. So yeah.
We're going to title this section, Thomas Isn't Perfect, but Neither Am I. How about
Cool.
that?
Yep. Right now would be a cool time for a title to appear.
Yeah.
Thomas
is not
isn't,
perfect.
but like have it say is perfect, but like with a little NT beside it. Okay.
No.
Anyway.
I think and not needs to be spelled out.
Not.
Not.
Is
yeah.
not.
Is not, so that
Is
they don't
not.
miss it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Bubble bursted.
So last time, he went over what we talked about in the gift, the purpose, and then I think probably one of the things that you can't go through with children is to talk about it and not talk about discipline, because discipline does matter. It's not easy because as parents we don't like to inflict pain, but you're either going to get it from me or you're going to get it from the world. And so if we can do it in a way that's loving and again directed at helping you grow in your faith and helping you in your ultimate purpose, then I think it's worthwhile. So discipline matters. I think the first 3 years are like this, you guys are past that, so maybe we should be giving this to
Give it to Kenzie.
Yeah. But the first 3 years matter. I think Thomas spent his entire third year of life underneath this counter we had in the back room in timeout because he just kept pushing. But by his fourth year of life, he was pretty good.
Like came out from under the counter.
He came out from
From under the counter.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, under the counter, because he was able to come out of timeout and not be in trouble. But I think it's important. So for me, it was knowing ahead of time, like what did I value, not just as like when you were little. Like when you were little, it was things like you can't run across the street, or you can't climb up on the counters, or you can't. One of the biggest challenges we had was when you wanted to crawl in the dryer.
Good.
I had a big issue with that.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, yeah. So like when you're younger, right? Children, especially between the time that they're born until about 6th grade-ish, their brains are in a spot where it is very black and white, right? There's a clear line of right, wrong, yet do this, don't do this, and you see that because with babies especially, like when things are in front of them, they're there, and if you hide it behind something, it's gone because it's not there. And so like it's kind of the same with discipline with children, right?
Right.
There is a like no, you can't run in the road, right? There's a no, you can't do get in the dryer. So there's clear do's and don'ts. But then once you get into 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and especially once you get into high school, your brain starts going through the development, and you're able to start cognitively thinking about things in a different way, right? And so, what does it look like? As far as discipline goes, there still are some don't do this, right? But what are some things that you did discipline wise with me and with Daniel that maybe weren't black and white, but were things that you decided would be black and white, even if other parents may not have done that?
Right. So for me, I think it was thinking through those things that are going to come up when they're in that age group that you're going to have to encounter and deal with. So things such as, do you have a cell phone or not? And Thomas was always mad at me because he got his cell phone when he started driving, because that was when he needed to be able to get a hold of me. His brother got his cell phone when he was 8, because he was visually impaired and he needed to get a hold of me sooner than Thomas needed to get a hold of me. So, I think some of it is knowing what you believe. I know the world has changed since then, so cell phones, kids have them much younger than that. But at that time, it was a big deal. What about exposure to what's on television? So things that are R-rated or violent. And we had some pretty, those remained black and white decisions in our family. We're not going to have any R-rated movies in the household. You can't have real violent video games. And I can even remember making you take a video game back, much to your chagrin. You were super angry at me.
Yeah, I remember at the time, in middle school, was when Halo came out. Halo's the game where there's a new Halo now, but at the time it was one of the first of its kind. It was a shooting game where you were fighting aliens, but you could also play against other people online, and you would shoot each other with laser beams and run over with cars and stuff. And I remember we had a big argument about the fact that I was not allowed to play Halo, but all my friends were playing Halo.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I actually played it was at the youth pastor's house, so and then from there on,
But I think that it's a slippery slope, right? So that things in life, if you look at the world now compared to what the world was like when Thomas was little, things have gotten progressively more. There's progressively more exposure to things that are sexual in content and violent in content, and so it's been a slippery slope over time that has just been each decision can lead to another. And at what point do you make that decision? So in our life, we made that decision that we're going to keep it pretty tight. When he is older and he can make those decisions on his own, then at least he will know where we stand on that. And the reality is that in our household, when he's home, we still don't watch our movies, and we don't watch our movies when he's not there, because we feel like we want to do things. People say what you eat is what you become. You are what you eat. And I often said to you, you are what you think about. So what you think about the most, what you feed into your brain, is what's going to drive it, whether it's intentionally, consciously, or unconsciously. And boys in particular are very visually oriented. And so for me, keeping that in mind as well, that young men are more visually oriented, and I wanted to keep that purity for as long as I possibly could. At some point you're going to have to let it go, but I think that it's a very short time that you get to work on those first few buttons, and so working on that and trying to keep that straight was important. And I think, send them outside. We spent a lot of time sending you outside. Go outside, go play. And I think sports were a good thing from the standpoint, sports in and of themselves are a good thing in that it does get you outside. It does keep you active. And so I felt like that was very important. So it became part of not just what we did with him, but it was kind of how we conducted our family. So make what you do important. We knew that people were going to get up on Sunday morning and go to church. We knew that we were going to be there on Wednesday night. We knew that those were the rules in the household, that this is even things like alcohol. I'm not against drinking, so don't get me wrong, but because I felt in the formative years it was important, like not having alcohol in the house was just something that happened. Could he go, when he was dating, could he go out on dates and be in places alone with his girlfriend? Like, we always encouraged him. Obviously he could do things that we didn't know about, but we always encouraged you to participate in activities where there were other people around, or if you were home like we were around, we weren't necessarily monitoring your every move, but just not to put you in a situation where you could make a decision that you would regret later.
Yeah, so how, I mean, you know, because I try to forget all the times that I was disciplined, but like how, when there were issues or things that would come up, like what were those conversations like from your perspective to me? Like, how would you address discipline issues? How would you go about it? Because, you know, I'm sure there were times that I did something and it just ticked you off and you were mad. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there were times that you were disappointed. So, like, how do you go about, like, following through with discipline? Because there's part of it that is setting a standard, like you talked about. Like, I think that's the easy part of, like, hey, like, we're at a spot, we're going to set a standard and we're going to try to live up to it. But like when discipline had to come in and they're on the back end because either I somehow wasn't perfect or, you know, how did that go? How did those conversations go? How did you approach that?
Well, since we had set the standard, like it was never, you always knew that you had broken the standard before I had to approach it, right? So if you were not home when you were supposed to be home, or you hadn't called, we had kind of a thing like our house, the doors are locked at midnight. So if you're not going to be in, you better be calling me ahead of time and letting me know what was happening. And so if you didn't follow through with that, then the consequence was whatever really was your favorite thing at the time, we would say, you know, we're just going to scale that back. Like we wouldn't take away things that were associated with school or sports, but you could lose your cell phone, you could lose your driving privileges, you could lose, you know, the time to be out. So we did some of that. So you were honestly a pretty easy child as you got older. But I think even once when you were in college, you came home and things were not going the way they should be, and I took away your cell phone and you were super angry, but you left and you thought about it for about 8 hours and you came back and you realized it was the right thing to, like, you realized that I was not disciplining you to be mad, I was disciplining you out of love. And I think that that's the key, is that I would tell you that I love you, and the reason that I'm doing this is because long term I want you to understand the ramifications of the decision you're making. Like, this is where this is going to take you.
Yeah.
And I think that it is hard. There were moments, and then in between times I would walk up to you like at soccer banquets or in public places and whisper in your ear that, you know, I am a really good mom. I could make you really embarrassed right now, but I'm not going to do that. And so
hold things over your head and embarrass you.
I'm not going to.
That's why I'm on my best behavior for this video, because I'm nervous that at any moment I'm going to have to stand up and turn it off. Because of an embarrassing story.
Yeah. So, but I think that our relationship was. Yeah, there are moments that your relationship is tense, but I think that for the most part, you recognize that the decisions that I was making were because I loved you.
Yeah.
Right.
What about, you know, not that anybody would do this, but maybe like a lot of times church is a spot, like especially Wednesday nights, is a spot where students come and they really enjoy coming. Would that ever be something that you would take away as a discipline? Why or why not?
I did not ever take away the church activities as a discipline, because I mean that was our end goal, right? Our last video we talked about the two
even
things.
Even if I enjoyed it though?
Yeah, even if you enjoyed it, because I felt like that was where we were still reinforcing, like, God is the prize, that's what you need to focus on. And I knew and trusted the leaders enough too to help them talk to you through, like, hey, because I knew if you were having trouble with me, chances are you would talk to one of them about this is what my mom did to me today, or this is what my mom and I are fighting about. And I trusted them enough to be able to say, well, from her perspective, or like, how do you think that relates to what we're learning about God? And so I think over the time, and sometimes you would come home from that and say, this is what a particular person had talked to me about as a result of that, and I learned something. And so, does it always happen that way? No, but I would not take away church. I would take away other things, but I would be far more likely to drive you to church and you would lose the car than to not have you at church.
Yeah. Just wondering, just shameless
yeah.
little hey, don't take this away.
And I think the other important thing with discipline, or just kind of in your relationship with your children overall, is that I struggled because I came from a family where my mom really pushed for perfection. So if you didn't have A's, you were in trouble, right?
Yeah.
And so perfection was that desire for perfection was one of my character defects. And I think our relationship improved when I realized I'm not perfect. We're all sons and daughters of Adam, so we're all sinners, even from the time we're little to, we go to our grave. And so I think recognizing that, and then being able to admit to you, hey, I made a mistake, or that was wrong, will you forgive me? So modeling those behaviors that show I learned something from that, I was wrong, and I still do that. I think that still I think that I've had to learn that, you're not perfect. I've learned from you, you learn from me. And I think over time too, recognizing that the other risk is that I could idolize you. I did idolize you at times, and that's a problem too. So making sure that my priorities in life, that my scripture reading, that my putting God first remains there too.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Because I feel like that is a lot to chew on, as far as, it's not, discipline is never fun, and it's not easy. And like you said at the end too, as a parent, you even felt like there were times that you may not have made the right decision, but you still were, you never did it because you were intentionally trying to be wrong,
Right.
You're doing it because we're all trying to figure it out together, you know, and every student is different, every situation is different, and so there are going to be mistakes that are made, right?
Right.
And so just understanding that if your heart is set on trying to do the right thing according to what God has laid out for us, right? You're trying to make, like we said, disciples of your children, disciples of your family, and so you're making these decisions not to just run a tight ship or not to have the perfect child or perfect student, but you're making these decisions to hopefully encourage them to walk closer to God, to hold them to a standard that God would want us to follow. There's going to be mistakes, there's going to be mess ups, and sometimes you may go one way too far and then go back the other way too far, but you're just trying to figure it out. But if your heart is set on what God wants and trying to lead your student, lead your family towards that, it's not wrong.
And to kind of wrap it back to where we started, which is God knit you together in my womb. He planned each one of your days. I think even in my lack of perfection, God is perfect, and so probably the thing I should have started with, but I'll finish with, is that I pray for you all the time. I pray for who you are as an adult. I pray for your marriage. I pray for your ministry. I pray for that where God is taking you, and that you will be, that your heart will be soft to hearing the Spirit speak to you and lead you in the directions that you need to go. And so I think that's probably the most important part. And I've been praying for you even when you were little, from the time you were little on up, that God would lead you and that that your days would turn out the way that He had planned. And so learning to trust God even in my faultiness, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. So to just end this video, this part of it, just a couple questions maybe again to think about, what are the standards that you have for discipline for your students at home? Like, are there things that you've set, and maybe you haven't, so like maybe now is the time to do that, because I feel like it's better late than never, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, what are some of the things that you as a family are like, hey, here's our standard that we're trying to live by, and this is the certain things, right? So maybe what does that look like? What does it look like to discipline and love with your student? And then what does it look like for you to pray for your student, right? Because we're praying for them here. During their small group time, we spend time praying for them, and we've started to have them write down prayer requests on a card. So each of their small group leaders has been taking home a card with them each week after our small groups to be able to pray for what the students are saying they need prayer for. So how can you partner with them in prayer as well, and with us in prayer for your student? So I think those are some good things to think about. I'm glad you guys got to hear from my mom, and she's on her way back to Iowa soon.
Yep.
She's going to be in Iowa when you actually watch this video, so you won't get to hear any other stories. So good thing I avoided
Sorry.
them.
Yeah, I told him I wouldn't embarrass him too much.
But all right, hopefully you'll join us the next time, and hopefully this has been helpful. See you soon.